brother in Marietta, Georgia, and his wife calls me and she says, Bill, I bought some grass-fed beef at the store today. I said, great. And she says, yeah, I got it for, I think it was $6.95 a pound. I said, well, yeah, that's imported. So she takes a picture of the label and sends it to me, product of USA. And we all know that if you fabricate beef that comes into the country, here you can put product of USA. It's an orchestrated deception that needs to be changed. There's liquidity issues. Very few people have money these days. There's a liquidity issue with the banks, if you've been following that. There's a liquidity issue with people, and it's just part of the culture right now. In 2019, August 12th, Tyson and their one Kansas plant had a fire. They said, we do 5,000 to 6,000 head a day, and our plant is burned. So immediately the price of live cattle dropped like a rock, and the price of beef to the retailers went up. And yet, what their thinking was, the innuendo was that 30 to 36,000 head of cattle weren't going to be processed that next week. There was going to be a short supply of cattle. What actually happened that next week, 9,000 head more than if the plant stayed active were processed around the country. And most of the processors, the big processors, were killing cattle for $150 plus the drop. Their profit went up as high as $600 a head, while the producer was, many of them, going south. Problem. What will be? Surely this can't last forever. We hope. There are several issues. I'm not a fortune teller. I don't pretend to know anything more than anyone else. It's just because of so much of my background, living in 13 different states, traveling all but 2, including Hawaii and Alaska. I've learned a few things in my 72 years. And that is that there are some things that we as a nation and we as an agriculture are going to have to deal with in the days ahead if we are going to prosper. There's sovereignty, demand, supply, capital, and control. How much time do I have here? I've got 20 minutes? Good deal. Woo. Sovereignty, the law of the least common denominator. If you compete with a third world country on price, we will become one. Brazil, Uruguay, Australia, New Zealand, they're subsidized. Cost to run a cow in a month is between 10 and 20 bucks. Last I looked, it's a little bit more here. One of the stops along the way for me was for 5 years. I was a farm and ranch appraiser and credit analyst for Farm Credit. Back in those days, you know, just after Abe, we figured you could afford to buy land and have $1,250 to $2,500 per animal unit in direct land cost to buy it, and still make it 10 years out of 10 years. Today, it's 14 to 20,000. What's wrong? We need market protection. We need tariffs. We need to bring back cool legislation, anti-monopoly. Depending on whose figures you look at, Cargill and Tyson are competing for the #1 slot at about 25 to 28% of the processing. Between the other 3, National being 1, Cargill, Tyson, who am I missing? JBS. They have about 78% of the cattle processing in the United States. That needs to change. If we're going to have government subsidy, maybe we ought to have regional packing houses contributed for by the government that will actually allow us to have stable and realistic processing prices. There needs to be competition in processing. Right now, the big four, 78%, there's not a lot of competition. Demand. Consumer education is so key. I don't think I've ever been any place in the last 15 years that when I start talking about grass-fed beef and the health benefits thereof, people don't get excited. I moved from Colorado. I got a really good job many years ago, about 1989, and I moved to Oklahoma, and I got sick. I don't know, the air in Colorado wasn't exactly like the central Oklahoma. I got allergies, I got impacted bowel, I got a bunch of things. And after having all the doctors say, we don't know what's wrong, I ended up in allergy shots and the allergy injections. After my third injection, I'm calling on a veterinarian in Durant, Oklahoma, started retching my guts out on the yard, and they took me for dehydration to the hospital. At that time, I said, I'm done with doctors. So I studied even more the benefits of proper nutrition, and it was juicing and grass-fed beef that kept me alive. For 7.5 years, I prayed the prayer, God either kill me or cure me, and he didn't do either. He got me to Tennessee, and I was a lot better, and I've been a lot better ever since. But the population growth factor, there are 7 billion people, a little over 7 billion in the world right now. We're headed for 9 billion if everything continues the way it is for 2050. There's going to be increased numbers of people wanting to buy your product. Prices have got to go up. Economics, I'll get more into that in other area, but economics is a huge deal. I will tell you some of the things that are happening right now because of my banking background. I study international economics. We're headed towards a new financial system, folks. It's going to be very interesting. Supply. The price paid for production, that's a big factor. I don't care how efficient you are, if you aren't getting a price for your product, there's no margin. Last I looked, it wasn't gross. It was net that really pays the bottom line. We've got to work together and increase that margin. There's a big transfer of resources, skills, and interests. As I go around the country, I don't see near the number of middle-aged and young people that I see in this room. You folks are blessed. It is so great to see a transfer of resources, skills, and wisdom for the future. And I have to say, one of my early introductions to North Dakota was to come up for the grass-fed exchange. Ken, a lot of folks spoke. It was the best blend of government and private sector I've ever seen in my life. You folks are doing a great job, and you're to be commended. The weather. I'm going to spend a little time on this. Are any of you over 100? I'm the only one. Folks, we're going into what's called a grand solar minimum. Are you familiar with the term sunspots? Ken probably knows it by coronal mass eruptions. The sun is a ball of energy, and it gives off these coronal mass eruptions, which are ionic showers that come to the earth and clean our atmosphere. They not only clean the atmosphere, they develop an electrical charge that is compatible with the earth and keeps it electromagnetically right. There are 11-year cycles in those coronal mass eruptions that goes from minimal activity to maximum activity to minimal activity, and it affects the weather. It affects the weather because, and I don't want to get too technical, you've heard the term cosmic rays. There's things that happen in space that cause negative energy in the form of cosmic rays to come into our atmosphere. Those negative rays will increase cloud cover, cool the earth, and cause disruptions in weather. Well, that 11-year cycle is superseded by a 100-year cycle. And that 100-year cycle is superseded by a 400-year cycle. Now, are there any global warming advocates here? God bless you. In 1979, somebody took the temperature of the earth and they took it today, and there was a change of 0.2 degrees. God, we got global warming. I'm scared. During the 400-year grand solar minimum, the Earth's temperature historically drops 10 degrees. It's a mini ice age. Now, I'm not saying that Florida is going to look like Bismarck today. And I'm not saying that, it's time to take cover. What I'm saying, change is upon us. And these ionic showers are going to peak between 2025 and 2030. Now, what has that meant historically? Historically, it has elevated food, the cost of food, 4 to 7 times. It has caused nations to buckle and break. It's not a pretty figure. And these global warming advocates, the fools, know it. But they're trying to control the masses with lies. So the truth shall set you free. If you study the grand solar minimum, you prepare for it, you're going to be the leaders in food production and provision in the days ahead. And if you want to know about it, there's a man named David Devine, who was actually a coffee buyer that was going to Malaysia and buying coffee. Well, he noticed over the last several years that the coffee beans were having cold damage. So he said, what's going on? This is, I've been buying for 25 years. Something's happening. So he started to study about what was happening with the grand solar minimum. And it's something that is going to be very important to know about. And he always says it's not global warming, it's the sun. So what can we expect? We deal with producers all over the country. Over the last 2 years, people have either been in a drought or been supersaturated. We have people in the southeast can't even finish their cattle now because the grass is so washy. They'll have 40 days of rain. So this increased cloud cover and the changes in weather are something to be very aware of. Capital. I worked for Farm Credit, and I left the work of the ministry, and the only thing I could really find that fit my skill set was going to work for Farm Credit during the farm crisis. So my first day on the job, by noon, we had 2 death threats and 1 bomb threat. I asked for hazard duty pay. They didn't think that was funny. At any rate, what I learned about Farm Credit and so much of the lending, it used to be Farm Credit's mandate was to just lend based on productive value. Whatever the land could cash flow, if you put 10%, 20%, 25% down, they would only lend based on what could be paid off from production. The banks came in and they started lending on speculation. Farm Credit changed. And now, just as I talked about the cost of land per animal unit, things are out of hand. During the Clinton administration, they repealed Glass-Steagall. What does that mean to you? What it means to you, there was a law called Glass-Steagall that said any money that came from the Federal Reserve to the bank had to be loaned to you for business. It was to stimulate business. By repealing Glass-Steagall and bringing in Dodd-Frank, they said the banks don't have to do that. They could invest that money and not have to lend it to the borrowers. So that's why the stock market has gone through the roof. The banks are investing your money. And they also changed the laws recently that your money in the bank is now part of the stock of the bank. If the bank goes, they can claim your money as an asset, a stock of the bank that can go as well. There's a change in the financial system coming. And again, people say, Bill, why do you get into all this stuff? And there's three types of behavioral types of people. There's the scout, there's the pioneer, and there's the settler. And people ask me, what's the difference? I said, the scout usually has more arrows sticking out of him. But at any rate, I've learned long ago, especially living at 72, I better know what's coming so I can prepare for it. And this is a real key in this financial system. Federal Reserve started in 1913. They decided that they were going to have a fiat money system instead of a gold-backed system like we had for 170 years with a stable economy, and you could just print money. Well, that has worked for a long time, but now China, Russia, and the rest of the world are deciding that the petrodollar, that Saudi Arabia, in an agreement with the US after World War II, decided that they were going to cause the price of oil to always be paid for in dollars, no matter what country it was. That's going to change. It's changing this year. Russia and China are backing their currency with gold, and we're going to have to too. And people, whether you love them or hate them, President Trump's mission is to convert to a gold-backed or a silver-backed U.S. currency that will supersede the dying Federal Reserve System. What that looks like, I have speculation, I have ideas, but nobody knows. But it's coming. Be prepared. And it's just something to be aware of, because in the days ahead, gold, silver, lead, food, and water may be more important than money. Control. Man's humanity towards his fellow man, or the lack thereof, is the key factor of whether any culture, any association, any marriage prospers or doesn't. There are basically four human motivations, according to the experts. There's fear, there's hate, there's incentive reward. One can be based on need, one can be based on greed. And then there's love. Love is the key factor that keeps a society together. It's the key factor that has built this country to be the greatest country in the history of the world, and it will be the preservation of that attitude and concept that determines its future. In 1831 and 1832, a man from France came over to this country, and he was wanted to find out why America was so great. So he went to the New York City. He looked all over the country at the businesses. Wasn't there. He went to the agriculture. It wasn't there. He started going to the churches. And in those churches, he saw united love activated. And he made the statement America is great because America is good. And if America ever loses its goodness, it will lose its greatness. I believe it's never been more important today to recognize the one true motivation that never fails, and that's love. And it's with that I will close, but I want to tell you, I've seen a lot in my years, and I am so thankful to see you, because you are the future of food and life sustained of this country, and it's people just like you, and I am honored to be in your company. Thank you.
Bill, can I?
Oh, yeah.
You want to stay? Is there some questions for Bill? Because we've got some time. He's